Welcome back to Left Acre. I'm Alexei the Greek.
And I'm Ryan Cooper. So today we have a little bit of an unusual guest, Mr. Michael Caley, who is a soccer analytics expert who publishes the Substack Expecting Goals, but is also a big-time politics data nerd, really digging into the weeds, and has been affiliated with the New Kings Democrats in some capacities for some time. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me on. Really happy to be here.
Yeah. And so your specialty, if I may be so bold, in terms of politics is New York, and specifically New York City. So this is why we wanted to have you, of course, to talk about the king Zohran Mamdani and just how he managed to pull it out against one of the most evil reptiles in all of Democratic politics, Andrew Cuomo. You know, a lot of informed people that I respect were saying that Cuomo has had this in the bag for a long time. I mean, it really seemed to be breaking towards Zohran, but almost nobody, except for I think PPP polling, actually predicted a convincing Zohran victory, which is what he got. It was like, what, 7 points or something?
7 points in the first choice, and he's going to make, it's a ranked choice system. He's going to make up even more in the ranked choice.
Yeah. So a pretty convincing and easy margin over Cuomo. And so I guess, yeah, maybe the first thing to do is to sort of break down the geography. You know, you sent us some data, which I looked at and didn't know what the fuck that I was looking at. It's broken down by like assembly district, right? And I'm not particularly familiar with the geography of New York City's assembly district boundaries. So can you explain that to a dullard like myself? What does that mean? The margins in those districts.
Yeah, so my apologies, and please, if I ever start just saying, well, this happened in the 52nd, like, stop me. My brain thinks in assembly districts. It's
like the 52nd Airborne is what you're talking about, right?
Yes, exactly. That'd be like a way cooler thing to mean. So, yeah, so there was a really fantastic piece published in the Times by Michael Lange. I'm sorry, Michael, I love your work. I don't know how to pronounce your last name. And he goes through sort of this regionally. And the core of it, I would say, is that where Zohran made up incredible margins, where he won, in some places, he and Lander combined for like 80+% of the first choice vote. That is on the sort of East River waterfront. So if you know, like there's like Astoria and Long Island City and Queens, down through Greenpoint and Williamsburg in Brooklyn, down over to like Clinton Hill. He breaks out the sort of the really fancy areas of Brooklyn, down to downtown Brooklyn and Brooklyn Heights away from this. I think that's arguable. Basically, that area, which is where historically, that is where most of New York City's DSA elected officials are elected from. That is where, and the number of the Progressive Caucus and the City Council, all of this, they come from that area. And in those are also the areas where back in 2018, Cynthia Nixon did the best. She didn't win majorities in most of the places, but that was where she did the best. And so this is a long-standing, like, left liberals, insurgents, progressives, they do well here. And Zohran dominated here. So, like, it's the area you expect him to do well, but like 80% instead of 60%, that's a big difference. And then the other thing and then the classic way that New York City works is that then opposed to that, this is the 2018 story. This is where, this is the 2021 story. Eric Adams ran up gigantic margins in working class Black and Hispanic areas of central Brooklyn, southern Queens, and the Bronx. And Cuomo did like 80-90% there back in 2018. Eric Adams is, like 60-70% first choice there. And that is, again, what happened here. That is where Cuomo is by far the strongest, but his margins are lower. Instead of like 65%, it's 55%. And there's also a turnout story here. But like that's like the traditional like leftist versus establishment insurgent whatever you're talking about. That's usually the way it works in primaries in New York City. And then you have Manhattan, which is always confusing. There's a lot of like upscale white conservatives there, which is like population that's much less attested elsewhere in the city. And like there it was a mix. But then the place where you see a really big difference is, while this is very much the story of what happened in working class Black areas, working class Asian and Hispanic areas, so parts of like North Brooklyn going into Bushwick and then out into Cypress Hills, there are heavily Asian areas of southern Brooklyn or of central Queens, Jackson Heights, areas of the Bronx. My neighborhoods get a little bit fuzzy here. I'd be like, the 30th Assembly District, I have to check what neighborhood that is. But those areas, which are areas where Yang did very well in 2021, where Cuomo did exceptionally well in 2018. Again, if you look at like Clinton Sanders maps, these are the same thing. Those areas Zohran flipped. Those areas went to Zohran, and he beat Cuomo there solidly, where historically progressives, insurgents, leftists have not won in those areas. So that's one of the big demographic flips. And then finally, there are white conservative areas. So you're looking at parts of Staten Island, parts of southern Brooklyn, parts of northern Queens. Little bit, you could maybe say the Upper East Side, but the Upper East Side is sort of just its own universe. And in those areas, Cuomo did quite well. But other than Haredi Orthodox Jewish areas, turnout was way down in those areas. So Cuomo does very well, like, white conservative voters voted for him. Like, sure, yes, they recognize their interest. That is fine. But turnout was way, way low there. And so what you have here is that all of these areas, Zohran you've got the sort of more heavily Asian and Hispanic areas. There's real flips in preference there. Everywhere else, it's that Zohran's doing better than expected for an insurgent by 5, 10, 15, 20 points. And everywhere that Zohran did the best, the turnout was up. Everywhere that Zohran did the worst, the turnout was down. So it's both and turnout and persuasion across the board in the city.
And then how do you contrast this with, there was a narrative during the Harris-Trump election, of course, that New York City went to the right and that Trump surprised and so forth. So maybe you could talk about that in terms of how it fits with what flipped here, what changed here.
Yeah, and that is exceptionally true. Now, what I would say is that in 2024, the flip to the right in New York City was presaged by a massive flip to the right in 2022. That Zeldin did very, very well in New York City, that we lost a number of traditionally held, like democratically held assembly districts, state senate districts going back decades were lost in 2022. Most of those were not regained in 2024, was actually a little bit worse. In 2022, nationally, the story was this very surprising Democratic strength, but New York City was the exception, along with Florida and a couple other places.
And how much of the differences are turnout versus not turnout based?
Yeah. And so you really have you've got a mix there again. 2024 is very much a turnout and persuasion election. It's very much the case that the areas where Harris was losing vote share, the Bronx turnout was really, really low. But also Harris lost persuasion share there as well. And one thing I wonder about here, I think there's a lot of different stuff going on. I think there's absolutely areas, especially if you're looking at like the bigger flips to the right in 2024 and in 2022 were in more heavily Hispanic and more heavily Asian areas. There were flips to the right in more heavily Black areas, but much less. It was and then obviously you got flips to the right in white conservative areas. That had been happening from 2020 on, but from 2016 on, but even more so. And so I sort of take two things from here. One is I think there's something really going on with where, in New York City at least, and probably nationally, where a lot of cross-pressured Hispanic and Asian voters are going to settle down, where they're going to find their political home. And I think Zohran managed to convince a lot of people who may have been switching to the right. But the other thing that's really important here is that Andrew Cuomo was running a campaign based on getting white conservative Democrats and Black and Hispanic conservative Democrats. And you know what those are called now? To a greater and greater degree? Republicans. Like, I think that part of his problem was that he was trying to build a coalition, which has historically been a quite impressive, a winning coalition in Democratic politics. If you can get white moderates and Black moderates, you will usually win primaries. But that's getting harder because of those flips to the right that we're seeing.
Yeah, fascinating. Maybe can we talk a little bit about income? There's a chart, John Gans posted it. It was going around that it basically showed, we'll put the links in the show notes, but it basically showed that Cuomo cleaned up among like the very poorest places and the very richest places, while Zohran did best in sort of the broad middle class. And in middle class in New York terms, realistically goes like pretty far up into the six figures, given how expensive it is to live there. What is that, is that much of a change from, historical trends? What's the story there?
Yeah, I think that this pretty well goes hand in hand with the long-standing insurgent versus machine, left versus center story in Democratic primaries, which is that that broad waterfront, that East River waterfront, Michael calls it the commie corridor. That is an area which has historically been like young professionals, gentrifiers, however you want to call it, a lot of people coming to the city, people who live in the city moving there. And those young folks are doing well enough to live in the city in places that are pretty nice to live, but they're not super wealthy. Like that is a big chunk of the middle income of the city, especially if you're looking at like where do people in sort of New York City middle income concentrate. So you get that as the median income. Again, those are those same areas. And then you have this story happening in parts of central Brooklyn as well, out into Bed-Stuy, out into Prospect Levert's Gardens in Brooklyn. Again, I'm going to know Brooklyn better than the other boroughs. And those are areas, again, where you're going to have that sort of that median income story really maps to the politics of those places. And then likewise, you're looking when you're looking at where do more establishment Democrats do the best, it is working class Black and Hispanic areas. And as I said, one thing that the gaps here, an important point about this is the gaps were, if you looked at this in 2018 with Cynthia Nixon against Andrew Cuomo, the gaps would have been much larger. What you have is both in these areas, Zohran is getting a larger percentage of the vote, even though he is clearly losing the vote of people with below average median incomes. And definitely he's losing those, but he's losing them by less. And the losses are larger in Black areas and smaller in Asian and Hispanic areas. So that chart, I think, captures the same thing we're talking about. But it's important to note that I think that the gaps we see on that chart are smaller, especially the size of the win with working class voters. Historically, it's been larger than that.
Gotcha. Yeah, go ahead.
Just real quick, but to break down the data just a little bit more, if we combine Lander and Mamdani, is there anything to say when you think about that and the kind of coalition they represent? Yeah,
and I mean here, like, I think that the coalition that they represent is, like, I can talk about the data. And what the data shows is that Lannister had this group of no Kings, no Cuomo, the sort of classic liberal areas, your Park Slope, your the lower Manhattan, and these sorts of areas where Lander definitely did outperform. Lander obviously is from Park Slope, so you expect to outperform there, but his politics are progressive. And it is not surprising that is where he did the best. Now, if you fit that into the income story, these are areas that are somewhat higher income. They are not the very, very, very richest areas. If you break it down by, you can get down to like the census tract level, the precinct level. Super wealthy areas in Upper Manhattan broke against against Lander as well as against Mamdani. But Lander sort of pushes up Zohran's numbers, in particular in, if you get like, 100K plus that area, that's where he's going to be the strongest, because that's where those sorts of progressive politics tend to be the strongest.
Now maybe we could talk about the campaigns a little bit. How did Zohran do it? I wasn't paying like laser attention, but it definitely got wide attention outside of New York. This was viewed as kind of a bellwether, and Zohran, it seemed to me, had the kind of campaign actually that a lot of the sort of popularist types tend to advocate for. Like, he was basically laser focused on quote unquote pocketbook issues. They're not the kind of pocketbook issues that the popularists like to talk about for some reason, because they are pretty popular. But, he's talking about like a rent freeze, which is historically very, common part of New York City policy, making the buses free, maybe in certain locations, opening up government-run grocery stores and food deserts, which do exist. I've learned in New York City, there are certain areas, sort of like in a lot of poor parts of the country, where there's just not a handy supermarket where you can go get fresh fruits and vegetables. He wants to do a baby box like they have in Finland. And so, yeah, I mean, that's what he liked to talk about. But when he was, pressed on Israel over and over and over again for the entire campaign, Stephen Colbert had him and Lander on, and Colbert really grilled him pretty hard on the Israel question, because Zohran has a long history of, basically advocating for Palestinian rights. And in those cases, Zohran didn't back down. He was, calmly and carefully explained his position, and he wasn't, sort of groveling or abandoning his prior commitments. But, his like, positive outreach was all about, here's how I'm going to benefit you. I mean, particularly low income New Yorkers. We're going to make this a city for everyone. And housing, that was another big part. He wants to build lots and lots of new housing to try to get rents to come down, and, allow more space for new people to move into the city. So what do you think first of all, is that an accurate description of the campaign? And second, why do you think it worked so well?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. That it is not that Mamdani refused to say what he thinks about issues. He was also out there. There have been ICE raids. There was this big thing where Lander was going to the courthouse in Brooklyn and helping to try to escort people out to keep them safe from detainment. And he got detained himself for a time. Mamdani has gone to those events as he did a thing where he got like yelled at Tom Homan and got some news for it. He's done that. But what is he doing, his campaign doing to like push out their message? What are they doing on social media? What does their website look like? And whenever he gets asked questions, he won't like ignore the fact that, ICE is detaining people lawlessly, but he will then talk about affordability. And he's doing it's so fascinating to me, because he's doing the thing that a lot of progressives online, as you were sort of saying, get annoyed about, the pivot to pocketbook issues. And he does it. You can watch him do it and over again. He's really good at it. And I think that's the thing, is that he's good at it. It's the problem that isn't that there's something wrong with talking about pocketbook issues. It is that he does it well. He does it in a compelling way. I think that his policies match his ideology. I think someone else could do it with different policies and they could just do it well, but he does it well. And the other part of that, the other thing that people do a lot when they want to talk about pocketbook issues is, instead of talking about pocketbook issues, they talk about how we should talk about pocketbook issues. He never does that.
He has actual proposals.
Exactly.
He identifies, imagine that, identify the needs of the constituents and then actually propose what he's going to do to address those needs. It's a miracle.
He doesn't say we shouldn't talk about ICE raids. We should talk about free childcare. He just talks about free childcare. Like it's a compelling way of doing it. It is the right idea. And like one thing that's been so striking to me is seeing just over the course of this campaign how much his campaign knows ball. Like they were out there trying to win. Zohran is a democratic socialist. Zohran is like a guy who knows theory.
He doesn't apologize for who he is or what he's for at all.
Doesn't apologize for what he's for at all.
He seems like a real person because he's actually like going to bat for what he actually believes. So there's not that dissonance, you know. He's not caught
But he's
out.
also, when he's out there talking about what he believes, he's talking about the parts of what he believes that are the most popular and that are the most compelling to the median voter in this election. He's doing both of those things.
You know, it's true when he's answering questions about like the police and you know, he quickly pivots from language like defund the police to the creation of the community safety or you know program that he wants to institute that is kind of in effect not funding the police more and instead of shifting resources. Like it's functionally doing what the people that are for defund the police what they want, of course, but he just knows what to focus on in narrating that policy and how to discuss it. He's very talented. I think he's very charming, very talented, and he's got good people around him, it seems like.
Yeah. I mean, he really has said quite specifically, I'm not defunding the police. He's not committing to more funding for the police, but he has committed quite clearly to like the NYPD budget he's not cutting the NYPD budget. And I think that like another part of like being good at this is you take something that is gonna hurt you and you have a good policy, you know, moving more things to social work, moving more like mental health care out of the police. Like that's a really, really good policy that he can push and he believes in.
Yeah.
But then he's so compelling, he's so charming, he's so good at this. People don't get mad at him for the little bit. He's like, no, we're not doing that part. Like that's just skill.
Yeah, the other thing I don't think I've ever seen him do is the Schumer move where he's like, this is a distraction. Schumer is always saying that the ICE raids are a distraction, and then that pisses everyone off because like it's not a distraction.
No,
this
he doesn't
is
throw anyone under the bus. He doesn't minimize the needs of any of the people that are harmed in these things, right?
Yeah, you're deflating the, you know, it's like this is a crisis that's happening to real people. It's not a distraction. It's a terrible thing. And we also need a rent freeze and to build more housing.
And the thing is, when you just did that, like, you're not a politician. It's really hard to do.
Right.
To make that pivot. Like, one of the reasons that people fail all the time trying to make that pivot is because it sounds like they're dismissing the first thing, or they're not compelling enough at talking about the second thing. And like, this is where so much of politics is, you know, real, like actual skills of speech and
instincts. He's got great instincts. So I remember one of the debates where they asked everyone what your first trip is going to be. And everyone's like, I'm going to Israel. I'm going to Israel. I'm going to Israel. I'm going to Israel. And he kind of just said, I'm going to stay in New York. Which is like such a great rejoinder. Like, what are we talking about here? I'm going to be the mayor of New York. Why would I go somewhere else?
Well, one last thing. I want to talk about Cuomo's campaign in a second, but one last thing before, you know, do you think as far as performance that Zohran had a specific skill at social media and especially short form video that had a big impact? You know, I watched a lot of his videos and they struck me as exceptionally good, especially compared to the normal Democratic like pablum. Again, you watch Schumer's videos, you get like 10 views on YouTube. He's just sitting there with his glasses all the way down at the end of his nose like he likes, and it's just not compelling content. But he, you know, Zohran reminds me of a lot of a YouTuber I enjoy quite a bit, Raleigh Williams, who's at the Climate Town channel, which is always worth a watch. It's very funny, very well scripted, very, you know, he's a very engaging presenter. And Zohran is kind of, he's like learned the influencer tricks of the trade almost. You think that played a big role?
Yeah. Like these, I mean, the thing with any kind of victory like this is a resounding, seismic, I'm like still in awe of it victory. And it's not always overdetermined. All of these things matter. And so trying to figure out how much everything matters is like the hard, in some ways impossible question. I tend to be a pretty big believer that the short form video stuff mattered a lot. I think that he was able to get, like, this is what the Democrats are always saying. why can't we be able to get our message out directly? Because what was the message he was doing on all of this like free media? It was all his message. It was all affordability. There were other things in there. There were charming little things in there, but it always came back to the core message. And so he was able to get that core message out to people by being good at social media, by being good at short form video and all these other things. And I think that made a really big difference. And it's very hard to figure out how to categorize that. Like it's very clear that he did very well with people under 45. There's evidence of massive turnout on people under 45. If you sort of group precincts by median age, he absolutely did. He did by a good margin his best in areas that median age was 30 to 35. And so like clearly he did his best with young people. And that has a lot to do with, that's mixed in with other things, but young people are also the people who are watching social media. And those people who are able to get his message more directly. I think all of it like fits together.
Yeah.
I really found it interesting for some of the videos. Like he would interview a bunch of halal cart guys, right? And
I love that one.
It was incredible. And it's like, okay, people are mad that they're paying $10 for something that used to be $8 or whatever. And so he's not afraid to get into the nitty gritty. So he talks to them like, why have your costs gone up? And he shows, oh, okay, you're paying $20,000 a year for the license because you can't get it directly because you're number 3,800 in line for a number of years. And then he's like, okay, so here's the proposals that address that will lower your cost when you go to buy your food. You are going to pay less because I'm addressing the cost of the vendor. And it's just like, Noam Chomsky once said, don't think Americans are stupid. If they can understand the complexities of American football, they can understand policy, right? It's just, you got to grab their attention and you explain it to them and they'll get it.
Yep, exactly. And he made talking about affordability fun and engaging. And then on top of that, he made like the New York City mayor's office actually controls a licensing process, which can in turn like make it so that prices can go down if the licensing process is relaxed. Like all of those pieces all fit together, and then the video was just like fun.
Yeah. On the Cuomo question, it strikes me that like a lot of great a lot of great progressive victories, Zohran was very lucky in his opponent. That they picked this guy who has, more baggage than a New York City garbage scow, going out to the, I guess Fresh Kills has been closed for many years, but whatever the landfill is. And he also, so I guess the first thing, to discuss is the, focus on Israel. Like this was basically Cuomo's entire campaign. Well, he had two things. He's like, I'm experienced. I know how to get things done. Look at the Second Avenue subway. It only took 10 years and cost more than the Grand Coulee Dam. And it was 3 whole stops. Wow, what an achievement. Such a brilliant manager you are, Andrew Cuomo. But the second one was Israel. And I think that was almost the primary message, that Zohran is an anti-Semite, that he's unsafe for Jews, running a kind of George W. Bush war on terrorism type of Muslim baiting Islamophobic campaign. And it just, I think it seemed to turn a fair number of Jewish New Yorkers against him, but as a, political matter, it just did not work. So do you think that, this idea that, to your previous comment, Alexei, that he's like, I'm going to stay here in New York. They're like, why are we even talking about this? This is not a president. We don't have a secretary of state in New York City. We don't have an embassy in Tel Aviv. Like, it doesn't matter that much. So what do you think about that, focus?
Yeah. And I think that the first place that I think this shows up in the numbers is that Cuomo's base, again, he had to win big margins with working class Black and Hispanic people. That's the core of the base he had to turn out. He had to know that from the start. That is, and like when he managed to get those early union endorsements, those early party machine endorsements, again, those are the voters he needs to turn out. And then his message never even tried to connect with those voters' interests. Like, there's a little bit of experience. It's the one thing that vaguely tried to connect with people's experience, with people's interests, but he never tried. And you see in his base areas Zohran did somewhat better, but the big thing I think is turnout was down. He did nothing to excite the base voters he had to excite. Turnout was quite high in certain areas of the Upper East Side where there are very conservative Democrats, a lot of sort of very conservative Jewish Democrats, and he won their votes. But like, what percentage of the electorate is that? What are you trying to do? The whole campaign never seemed to understand where his votes were really coming from.
Yeah.
Like,
he's
say what you will about Eric Adams.
He's quite racist too. He's probably quite racist, and so he's like, Clyburn endorsed me. You know, the blacks will go for me now. Like, he probably had some racist kind of thinking like that.
Like there was just a total mismatch of what you're trying to accomplish and what you're doing. And I think that there was I earnestly would love to know if they did like hardcore message testing on their ads. Like those ads look to me like just that's what Cuomo and his backers and his people felt good about. I don't think they tested whether those ads were going to be compelling to the voters they needed to get.
Not for lack of money. They had a ton of money, right?
I don't understand how you run this campaign and that's what you're doing. I mean, the other thing, though, is, as Ryan was saying, is that it's just like, this is a terrible candidate. This is a guy who is, he resigned in disgrace. Mamdani had that fantastic viral hit on him at the second debate. Lander went after him really hard on this. We had, a number of the women that he harassed were made real like public stands and organized. And I think that a huge part of how like this base that Zohran put together in particular, that he does very well in Park Slope, that he does very well in the West Village, he does very well in the Upper West Side. Like, those are voters who, if they had been presented with a machine liberal, if they had been presented even with a somewhat conservative Democrat who was not a disgraced sex pest, like, does Zohran do so well there? Does Lander do so well there? Does this Zohran Lander attaching themselves at the hip on the Upper West Side, does that work the way it does? I don't know. But with Cuomo, works 100%. Cuomo got murdered among liberal voters. And so, like, if you can get liberals and leftists together, you're close to a majority coalition. Zohran had to do more than that, but like Cuomo making the liberal leftist, the coalition work was a really big part of this.
And to that point, what do you think the role of ranked voice? Now, we didn't have to get past the first round, but ranked choice voting and the cross endorsement with Lander. What do you think about how that played into everything? Yeah,
I mean, it was like I get like choked up thinking about.
It's like the opposite of what Elizabeth Warren did, basically.
It is, and it is a leftist Muslim and a liberal Jew out there saying, this is what we agree on. And like, that's what New York City is supposed to be. And I think it made a huge difference. I mean, one thing that was really striking to me that made a huge difference, I think, is not quite the thing I expected. It is that Lander, so if you saw the debates, there's so many people on stage. Adrian Adams, city council speaker, Whitney Tilson, rich guy, Jessica Ramos, Zelner Myrie, state senator, lots of people who raised a lot of money and got on that stage and were doing their thing out there. Lander got 11% of the first choice votes. All the other candidates combined for 8%. So part of what happened with Lander and Zohran going out there so hard together in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, is it raised Lander's profile. I hadn't thought about that, but of course it did. He was in the news because he was there. He was on all of Zohran's social media. And
now there's 3 people being talked about instead of just 2.
The thing about him at the immigration court, like, he does that all the time. He wasn't doing that just that one time. He's been doing that for a long time. But that gets him news because he's doing something great and good. And he
got assaulted himself also.
Yep. Exactly. And so it raised his profile, and he put everything into validating Zohran for people who were concerned about a socialist, for people who were concerned about a Muslim socialist who supports BDS. And he was saying, like, putting himself out there to say, we agree on the stuff that matters to New York City. We may not agree on all of these other things, but we agree on the stuff that matters to New York City. And then at the same time, his campaign's money, and I want to give Zohran Mamdani credit for this too. Both of them had a fair amount of money, and they put all of their money into bashing Cuomo. Like
I was going to say, is it the case that, because it doesn't strike me that Mamdani did a lot of negative ads or anything. It seems like Lander is more of the attack dog.
Yep. I kept wishing for more attack during this campaign. I was like, you got to knock him down. You got to knock him down. You got to knock him down. But it worked. And I do wonder if maybe they just did the math on how much TV they could buy. And they were like, we're going to have to spend it at the end. But Lander and Mamdani really did spend their money at the end, just hitting Cuomo as hard as they could. Yeah.
The other thing I think, about RCV, it really enables this sort of coalition building because you're not, it's not winner take all. One person only can win. And that tends to create a lot of, backstabbing and infighting among the sort of lefty lane candidates. Whereas the RCV, you can just say, rank me 1, rank Zohran 2, whatever you think.
And we'll have another crack at it, right? Because if you get past the first round, then who knows what could happen. Right?
It'll come out in the wash. The main thing is don't rank Cuomo. It allows for a much more tactical
and that was a messaging, like, don't rank Cuomo. That was like over and over and over again.
From the start. This is something at NKD that I really pushed for. Is we amended our endorsement process to be able to endorse multiple candidates in a race that has ranked choice voting. Working Families Party did this. A number of the progressive clubs around the city did this. And so to me, a lot of the success of the Lander-Zohran cross-endorsement and then the rank the slate stuff, like Tish James gets Adrienne Adams out there at an event together with Zohran and Lander, and she pushes rank the slate as well, the New York Attorney General, Tish James. I got another thing on that. But I think that a lot of that was really downstream of the progressive institutions in the city.
Right.
It was, if it went when whoever it was, I don't think that there's any chance that Zohran wouldn't have wanted to do this. But like when Zohran went up for endorsements, all of the progressive clubs were asking him, and are you going to work together with everyone else to beat Cuomo? And he was like, hell yeah, every time.
Cool. Yeah.
And like, so there was this idea that grew up well before Zohran surged. Everyone was committed to, we've got to beat Cuomo. It was started out as we got to beat Adams. That all of this was structured around beating Adams. Adams drops out. It turns into everyone beat Cuomo. But all of that really sort of, in many ways, bubbled up from the like progressive infrastructure in the city.
Solidarity, that's one of the main principles of being a socialist. Well, so on that point, what do you think the role of DSA, because as you mentioned before, they have a strong organization in New York, DSA, Working Families. What do you think the role they played or other such organizations played in helping him win?
Right. And so I think that, like, if I'm sort of separating out the progressive clubs from DSA as a socialist organization. The progressive clubs were really pushing very hard on the rank the slate, on the combining forces, and that really worked. What DSA did here was a truly astounding organizing victory. And like, I think that there's a whole bunch of great stuff on the field campaign that he had. My door was knocked multiple times, way more than I am used to in any of these campaigns. I'm in North Brooklyn. I'm in like core Zohran turnout territory. Like they should have been prioritized in my area, but they did. And like I signed up to volunteer, and it is seamless getting you to the canvas, getting you to the poll site on election day, and getting you back involved. I know people who were like, local organizers, not themselves like DSA organizers, but they were like, they knew the neighborhoods, and they were able to integrate themselves into Zohran's teams over the final week. And like this poll site, you don't want to be standing on this corner, you want to be standing on this corner. This is where people come from. And they brought that local knowledge in. So there's both the story of they were updating their voter rolls they're updating their databases so fast. Like the back end system, the organization system was truly, truly fantastic. And in many ways, what this is about, like, I tend to think, like, I think a lot of people come up in politics, they start at super, super local races. If you're running a race for city council, for state assembly, you really do need your field operation. People aren't going to hear about you other than field. You got field and mail. You don't have any other way to get the information out. And so, but the higher up you go, the more money you get to. Field matters less and less. Field moves votes. You don't not do it because it moves fewer votes. But if you can pay for TV, if you can get like lots of people watching your YouTubes, that's gonna move more votes. It's just like the numbers of how many people you can reach. But Zohran had such a huge field campaign because he excited so many people. And then suddenly, suddenly you have a field operation that can actually get the number of touches that can really move votes in a material way. But it is not easy to turn that into an actual organizing army. And like, so I think that Zohran and the folks at DSA, as well as like some non-DSA folks he hired, did a really amazing job. And I think that like, this is also like a huge, huge victory for the NYC DSA model within DSA. There's a huge victory for, we are going to win elections with socialist candidates who are absolutely democratic socialists, but who are not out there having left factionalist ballots, who are out there trying to win elections by doing the things that are the most popular about socialism. And that vision of what DSA can and should be, this is just a spectacular victory for all the folks within DSA who've been fighting for that vision.
Yeah, that is well said. The promise of sectarian leftism, where you're making excuses for Putin and Ukraine and trying to say Hamas is actually good. That's a dead end of dead ends. Zohran's, the proof is in the pudding. One last question on Cuomo. He ran like a 1990s or a 2010s kind of campaign where I guess you'd say a post-Citizens United campaign where, you don't really do all that much field. You don't really go to do traditional campaigning with lots of rallies and whatnot. Like, he didn't really bother with that stuff. What he had was a ton of money, and a ton of money from some of the worst people in the world, Bill Ackman, a bunch of other Trump voters. I think it's correct.
And endorsements from the worst people in the world, too.
Yeah.
Like, the very worst people endorsed him.
Judge Holden from Blood Meridian endorsed him. Cthulhu came up from the vasty deeps to say, I think I saw a post on Blue Sky that they finally translated the last message of the Zodiac Killer. It says Andrew Cuomo for mayor 2025. But yeah, as you say, kind of the conventional wisdom is that like ads work. And I think it's correct to say that Cuomo had more money than every other candidate put together, or close to it anyway. And as you said, even these like, fifth tier, sixth tier, seventh tier candidates had tons of money for such a relatively, low stakes race.
Also name recognition. I mean, he was the governor, like everyone knows who he is. No one's heard of Mamdani. It's just a lot of these people are no names compared to him. So that's usually a huge advantage, right?
The sort of the way I would put it is that he had this massive paid media campaign. He was able to put lots of ads on the air, and I'm sure those ads moved votes. I think they moved votes very inefficiently, but like ads move votes, no question about it. But what was his earned media strategy? What was his strategy for, I want people on the news talking about me. I want people on social media talking about me.
I think it was, he's an anti-Semite. I think that was the earned media campaign, right?
Be scared of Zohran.
Yeah.
Rather than anything positive about him. And then he's not out there, as you're saying, he was like hidden. I assume he was like lazy and kind of felt that mayor is a job that's beneath him because he should be on a track to be president. I think his heart wasn't in this from the start. And so that's why he's not out there doing things. He's not, some churches and union halls. That was it. And none of it in ways that were going to make news. And so what this means is that his earned media strategy becomes his paid media strategy. And it is just all the hits on Zohran. And so that misses so many opportunities There just wasn't any real strategy to mobilize people. And the politics of fear that he was trying to play into, like, you know, the politics of fear can work, but you got to know what people's fears actually are. The people he was trying to turn out, their fears were not the fears that he was trying to mobilize about Zohran. Like, it's just a mismatch.
Also, Mamdani does not look like a scary guy. Let's be honest. He's like a sweet, charming, handsome young man, you know, like someone who you'd want to marry your daughter kind of thing. Like,
clearly, we need to just keep nominating our hottest socialists. I think
that's 100%. Oh, that reminds me. He didn't abandon either. I mean, there's a lot of criticism that Harris was all about celebrity endorsements and so forth. He didn't shy away from that. He had celebrities involved in his viral video campaigns. He went on a bunch of podcasts. He did basically everything. He was just out there all the time, which I think was so smart and cool. And it wasn't like, oh, there's only one way to do this. No, let's do all the things.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a funny quote from that Gans piece where he's talking about the uphill battle of Cuomo's campaign, that, you know, Zohran is basically a member of Al-Qaeda. And Gann says, quote, "Let me tell you a little secret. Most New York Jews really like New York's diversity. We like it that it attracts the Mamdanis of the world. We like sharing it with people of lots of different backgrounds. That's what makes us feel safe and happy here, especially when they're such a mensch like him. A nice college boy. His parents are professors. He went to Bronx Science and to a liberal arts school. I'm sorry, but you are going to have a hard time convincing liberal, educated, upper middle class Jews to not like a college educated, left leaning immigrant. And one who tried to make a career in the arts? Forget about it. The guy is practically Jewish."
It's very clear that like secular Jewish areas went very strongly. Like certainly, you know, Orthodox Jewish vote, Haredi vote went for Cuomo, but everywhere else with high percentages of Jewish voters went for Mamdani. This strategy was, who is this for? Again, who is this for within a Democratic Party?
I think Cuomo's racism comes into play. He assumes that all Jews are Islamophobic. It's like, no, that's not exactly the case, right?
Yep.
What do you think? We have a few minutes left here. What do you think about, I mean, it seems like there's going to be a massive campaign to take, I mean, immediately the attacks started on Mamdani from all over. Although I was pleased to see that Schumer, Jeffries, and Hochul immediately supported him in their first comments. They were like trying to beat each other to the punch there, which was a nice surprise. So, what are your thoughts about his chances for the general election?
Yeah, I feel very confident about the general election, and I think that an important point here is that when you win a massive public primary, it gives you a different kind of authority. And, you know, the one major New York's, like, you know, AOC endorsed him, some, you know, other people on the left and progressive side endorsed him, but the one really major New York state elected official who backed him was Tish James. Tish James, who her attorney general's office had run the investigation into Cuomo. She was absolutely the leading person who forced him to resign in disgrace. And she committed herself to this campaign. I didn't love her decision to push Adrienne Adams into the race, but she did support, or she had Zohran on her ranked slate. And then on election night, like I was waiting for that speech to begin. Like, Zohran, when are you getting on stage? When are you getting on stage? When are you getting on stage? I'm waiting for it. And then Tish introduces him. And I'm like, they definitely waited to get her there to give, and she gives the victory speech. She gives a speech. This is the Democratic nominee. This is the next mayor. And then he gives his victory speech as well. And so, like, having Tish James makes a really big difference. Jumaane Williams, public advocate, was also there to support, and a number of other. So you have within the Democratic Party major figures who are there to back him. Hochul made a much stronger statement than Schumer or Jeffries, also backing him. And I think that, like, there's a really strong tendency. One, there's a lot of people just don't like Cuomo, didn't want him to be mayor. Tish James back then. And then there's just like people want to be on the side that's winning, man.
Yeah.
Like, you win this kind of primary, you with this kind of margin, I think when the RCV comes in, I would probably take the over on a 10-point victory at this point when the RCV comes in, but we'll see. It'll be in that range. Like, you win that kind of victory and you have an opportunity to say, this is what we're all doing. And I think that, and then because the Democratic Party is not really an existent organization, this is something I'm really like actively trying to change. That's what New King's Democrats is all about, is trying to build a Democratic Party that actually do things, that can actually accomplish things. But there isn't one. And so what you have is lots of different elected officials freelancing and responding to whatever is going on. And that's how you get the New York Attorney General on stage with him on election night. That's how you get Hochul endorsing. And so long as nothing goes really wrong, I'm always like cringing a little bit that something's going to go wrong. But as long as this continues and we get the Democratic Party organizing behind him, he's going to win. Like, you're on the Democratic line, and it's going to take, I don't know. The other thing I think about, like, why did Cuomo get all those endorsements, the traditional union endorsement? The unions are going to back Zohran. What? Like, come on. And why did he get all the union endorsements? Why did he get those machine endorsements? It's not because they like love the guy. It's because they can't do anything. They saw he was that Cuomo debuts at 35%, and his strongest areas are like the traditional strongholds of the machine. Their voters seem to prefer this guy. And so instead of saying, Andrew Cuomo is a terrible guy, Andrew Cuomo is really unpopular, Andrew Cuomo has like, a baggage train to make a medieval army blush, like, and so we should do something tough. We should say Adrienne Adams, down the line, like party center, solid in with the machine Democrat. We'll back her instead. And if they'd done that, would she have won? I think probably. I don't know, but like really, like she would have been certainly a stronger candidate than Cuomo, but it would have been hard. It would have entailed fighting their voters, fighting Cuomo, saying no to Cuomo. And there just is no capacity within the Democratic Party establishment to do hard things. And
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Zohran winning by 7 on election night, probably by 10,
made it easy.
Trying to beat him in a general is hard. Yeah. And that's why I'm very hopeful that these folks are not going to be able to really mobilize against him. Because, like, sure, Bill Ackman's going to give tons of money. There's going to be a ton of money put in to attacking Zohran. Zohran is probably going to be somewhat unpopular by election day because there'll be so much money put into attacking him. But how are they going to get the Cuomo votes for someone who isn't a Democrat? I just don't see the path there.
Yeah,
that's really hopeful.
Just one brief thing before I forget. I think a lot of people, I mean, actually, straight up, a lot of people who gave money to Cuomo don't like him. They gave him money. There was a guy who told the Times he gave Cuomo $250,000 because he assumed he was going to win, and he basically needed to hand him a bribe to stay on his good side. And he's like, I wish I didn't have to work like that, but that's how it is, which is awful.
A real problem we have on the left. Like, I mean this sort of jokingly, I don't want this to change, but like, is that our people actually want to do and accomplish good things, and so their priorities in office will be trying to accomplish good things that make people's lives better? And if you don't care about that, then you can go up to people and say, I don't care what it is you back. Whether you back what you do, the thing that you want to do, it's good or bad, I don't care. You don't back me, it doesn't happen. Right. Like, that's a real power that Andrew Cuomo has. And like, I totally agree. A lot of people, like, they saw that and they were like, well, I've got contracts with the city. I got to give him money. But now, like, he's not in the race. I think a huge number of those people will be fine. They'll certainly now, their job is going to be like lobbying Zohran Mamdani so that the things that they want to have happen will happen. And Zohran Mamdani's job is going to be managing those and figuring out which are in the best interest of the city. And like, but that should be normal politics. The problem is that Cuomo not caring about whether people's lives get better is a real political superpower in a primary.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Ryan, you mentioned this was a bellwether, because I think we should just briefly talk about the implications going forward for national politics, right? And regional politics elsewhere, because like part of the surprise is that there was a whole lot of effort after Harris lost to blame the left and to say that, the problem is we're not like being fake Republicans well enough or something, right? And so this provided a very strong counter to that. And you even have like the Pod Save America guys who are sounding like socialists suddenly. They're like, yeah, this is our guy, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so it's a very interesting.
This was a liberal socialist coalition, absolutely.
Yes. I mean, what do you think? The possibilities seem. I think that this is encouraging for what could come from it in terms of the narratives that are hopefully going to die and the kind of possibilities that'll be on offer because of the narratives that'll live. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that what Zohran offers, this is a local election. This was an election where he focused on local issues. The affordability crisis he was talking about, it resonates nationally, but he really focused in on things in New York City. Like he's talking to the chicken rice guys about their pricing. And I think that we shouldn't extrapolate from this that all of the specific things that Zohran did are the path forward for the national party. You know, if you're trying to represent a different district, you got to do these things very differently. If you're trying to represent a larger area, you've got to do things very differently. Like that, you got to find out, like Zohran figured out where the median voter was. This was a median voter theorem campaign. He found out where the median voter in the primary was, and he found it. And so, like, there will be a different median voter elsewhere. But the possibility of doing a socialist politics that knows ball like that, and knows ball and isn't soft pedaling its socialism at the same time, like, that is a possibility in so many places across the country. Like, is that a governor or a president? I don't know. We things will take time. But is that a way that you can win a congressional district? Is that a way you can win another mayoralty? All of these things, I think, offer a path forward for the left. And you look at like what DSA electoral does. It's not like try to immediately jump to electing someone at the highest possible office. It's these things work at the assembly district level, the state senate level. A few places they work at the congressional district level. Now they work at the city level. Like that's the way that we're building. And I think that's the kind of path forward that he offers. You know, you got to have talented people. You got to have the right moment. And like the other thing is like, sure, does Zohran lose if it's not Cuomo? If it is some reasonable Democratic moderate who isn't a horrible person that everyone hates? Quite possibly. But that's why you do it. If you're not running the campaign, you don't happen to luck into the time that you get to run against Andrew Cuomo. And then you get to win. And
there's a lot of terrible candidates out there and a lot of terrible incumbents and a lot of people that, I mean, right now the vibe is that both parties are kind of hated. They don't think politics works for them. And so insurgent candidates are I think embraced if they sound authentic and like are going to do something different.
Yep. And like so many of these people haven't faced a real challenge. Some of them don't have a glass jaw. Some of them you send somebody up against them and they actually got this job because they're good at politics. Okay. Yeah. But you don't know which ones.
That's right. Yeah.
You throw those punches and you're going to find some glass jaws.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Maybe one last question at least, if you have time. So
a great time.
something I forgot to mention earlier, you know, to tie in with Zohran winning, you know, people making from something like, 50 to 75,000 up to, you know, the mid six figures, more or less, with some variation. Is that his campaign, while broadly inclusive, trying to benefit everyone at once, sort of necessity would benefit poor people the most. These are the people who are most rent burdened. These are the people who would most benefit from, you know, a baby box with like $500 worth of baby stuff for new mothers.
Free buses.
Overwhelmingly, that would be taken up by the poorest people, and yet the poorest people voted against him overwhelmingly. And so my question is the PMC the actual revolutionary class, the class that can represent society as a whole?
It's so funny. And like, because the PMC, what it seems very clear from these numbers, from any polling you do on this, from any election results you get, is that reasonably affluent people with college degrees, and some more downwardly, some more upwardly mobile, their politics are a material politics mostly for other people. And like it's so like people talk about like post-material politics, and it is post-material in some sense, in the sense that like they are not the specific interests of someone who is employed with like, you know, you've got a college degree and you have an office job, you've got it, you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, or whatever graduate degree you've got. Like, they're not out there fighting for the rights of lawyers. And like, so it is post-material in that sense, but it is not post-material in the sense that they are very, very focused on everyone getting a shot, everyone getting what they need to live on, everyone having a life that they can live and love. And like, so they are, as a class, committed to this politics. And the test of when they win is like, it creates this opportunity then. Like, yes, Zohran did not get the votes of most working class New Yorkers. That's clearly the case. But if he can govern for working class New Yorkers, if he can do a good job, that's how you move that. Like, maybe you don't move that in the first primary. You might not move that in the second primary. Like, these things take over time. But like the opportunity to govern, the opportunity to provide goods to people. Like,
then you ask them, is your life better than it was before? And they say, oh, it is. Sure enough, I like the guy now, right? You know, it's interesting. I bet you that those PMC people that you're talking about who care about the material interests of others were also probably quite happy that he didn't throw trans people or immigrants under the bus, right? Like the solidarity applies in the same kind of way.
Absolutely.
Although I am interested, are the South Asians and Hispanics you're talking about, do they tend to also be small business owners who maybe voted for Trump because they thought their pocketbooks would be improved under him? Something like that. Like, was there a kind of kitchen table crossover that did address maybe not the highly educated, but like the maybe immigrant small business owner class?
Yeah, it is a hypothesis that gets like it's very, very hard to tease out from the data, because the population of people who vote in a general election, the population of people who vote in Democratic primary are different populations. And so my guess is that most of the people who flipped to Trump over the last 8 years, and in New York City, Hispanic and Asian voters flipped to Trump, they probably just didn't vote in the Democratic primary.
Right.
But
right.
there's got to be some overlap between these things. It's not, I don't think it's zero. And I think that if you have people who are becoming Republicans, and for the most part, people who had conservative ideologies to begin with and find themselves not represented in the Democratic Party, but they're probably going to stay conservative. But if you've got people who are like not quite that ideological, people who are like, I think there is like there's a mushy middle in there of people where are some of those people that Zohran convinced? I think probably.
It's not hard to imagine someone who is kind of apolitical, doesn't really know what's going on in the national, debate, is not well informed by the, traditional media that they watch, if they watch any at all, voted against Harris because of inflation and really nothing else. And then they hear like a nice pitch from, a Zohran canvasser, and they're like, well, that sounds pretty good.
Yep. And this is also why I think it is so important for the left and for insurgents and progressives to nominate candidates who have like experience identity ins with voters that are hard to reach. Like did Zohran do better with South Asian voters because a lot of South Asian voters who would be dubious of a socialist immediately felt that he would understand them and their interests? Absolutely. AOC wins in a district because she is able to get an immediate in with a lot of the Hispanic voters there. This is Ayanna Pressley in Boston with black voters. Like, if you can start with that in, it makes such a big difference, because you're trying to sell something new and difficult to people who don't have a lot of time for politics. You're trying to sell something really ideological to people who are often like a little bit dubious of ideology. And you start with that in, it makes a really big difference.
How much do you think his background, and I don't just mean that his father's a brilliant scholar. His mother is also extremely talented and brilliant. And, he comes from a certain amount of privilege in that sense, but he also has the interesting background of being born in Uganda and lived in South Africa. And yet he might be new to the public, but he's not new to politics. He has a lot of experience. So what role do you think that played in his kind of savviness?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that we are going to get I expect to see a bunch of really good magazine profiles of him, as well as a bunch of really terrible magazine profiles of him. And I'm really interested in how he was not elected as a primary candidate for state assembly. He struggled relatively compared to baseline, compared to a number of other DSA candidates. And I'm really interested in his evolution over time.
What lessons did he learn? Maybe
came out exactly like obviously being able to win an assembly like that, being able to win the surgeon assembly district. So I don't want to be speaking that. That's a great accomplishment. But I'm really interested in maybe being the last 6 years.
The son of professors. Maybe he strikes me as being a very curious, inquisitive person. Maybe he's constantly learning and becoming right. Like I could see that kind of as his way of being, like getting better and better at things. So.
Yeah, they say, experience is the best teacher. You think of, let's see, when Franklin Roosevelt was on as vice presidential nominee for the Democrats in 1924, and they got absolutely killed, just massacred. One of the biggest blowouts in American history. And yet 8 years later, here you go. Well, that's probably a good place to wrap up. Michael Caley, anything you want to plug before we let you go?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. And just this is what a great time to get to talk about politics on a podcast. I just thank you so much for the opportunity just to talk about this. But yeah, I do on the Expecting Goals newsletter talk about politics. Sometimes it's mostly soccer analytics. Maybe you're interested in that. I have a podcast called The Double Pivot. That's like basically all soccer analytics. But you might like that. I don't know. Either way, thanks for.
So just real quick, speaking of soccer, World Cup is being hosted in Trump's America next summer, which is, I can't even imagine a more disastrous idea now. It's just, who's going to come? They might all think they're going to get deported. I don't understand. Anyway, any thoughts on that?
So one thing one thing we're very interested in the podcast, one of the things I love about soccer is that, like, what I tell the people is that if you're a person who likes sports and you're interested in the stinking guts of global capitalism, soccer is the sport for you. American sports are all ring-fenced from those concerns, and soccer is in it. If you want, you learn about what is going wrong in the world faster following soccer than almost anything else. And
love it.
I don't know how the World Cup is going to come up. There's a huge variance in how much the U.S. government is going to what degree is the U.S. government going to say, we throw this party and it's a success and Trump looks good? And to what degree is the U.S. government going to say, we're going to demonstrate to the world, fuck you, we can do whatever we want? And I fear right now that everything is tending toward the second, and that could be a real disaster. But things always flip around. Hell knows.
Sorry, that just reminded me, speaking of the fuck you, Trump is obviously so big mad about Mamdani winning. He is so mad because he's so jealous, I think, of how successful he was, that he talk about projection. He called Mamdani ugly, which, come on. This is hilarious. This is classic psychoanalytic. Okay, Trump, you're upset that he's really, really good on TV and he's good looking, and you, my friend, are not. So anyway,
I look forward to him starting to post about Zohran the way he posts about AOC, or he's like, okay, fine, she's great, but
yeah. If there's anything Trump respects, it's being good on television. You could get a cabinet seat if you're on his TV enough. But anyway, yeah. Michael Caley, the Substack, will link it. It's called Expecting Goals. Frankly, I didn't really know there was such a thing as soccer analytics before I clicked on that. But, maybe I'll give it a read. It could be interesting. There's only one way to find out. But thanks for listening, everybody. We will see you in the next episode.